Kia ora te whānau, welcome back to Under the Whāriki. I'm Anatola.
And I'm Tahu. Today we have a pretty interesting topic that I'm very naive in, conversion therapy. And we have two lovely guests, Shaneel and Trinity. Tēnā kōrua. Would you guys like to explain just who you are and a little bit about yourselves and what you do?
We can start with Shaneel if you like. Yeah.
Kia ora, I'm Shaneel. I use they, them pronouns. I am a law student and psychology student at the University of Auckland, and in my part-time I write for the Herald.
Nice. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and where are you from?
I was born in Fiji. My dad is Fijian and South Asian, and my mum's South Asian, so I'm Fijian and South Asian. I don't quite know where in South Asia I'm from. India most likely, and that's because many years ago the British colonized India and Fiji and brought Indians to Fiji, so I guess I belong to a group of displaced peoples.
Hi.
Thank you.
And now you're found.
Yeah.
Here is Shaneel.
Shut.
Bye, Trinity.
Tēnā tātou, heuri nei no ngā tukimata o kahununu me ngā whenua kikorangi o Muaupoko e mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Kia ora. My name is Trinity. I also use they, them pronouns. I whakapapa to kahununu and Muaupoko. And yeah, what do I do? Photographer and poet, and then I work for a really cool gallery outside of that, just as like my day job, and yeah.
Mean,
Very
Trin.
cool.
If at any point, I know you're on Zoom, but if at any point you can't hear us or you need us to speak a little bit louder, just let us know. Don't even feel like bad for interrupting. Cool, so kind of to warm up the space, warm up the couch, the chairs, and just like for us to address a really, really painful but really important topic is we want to do a little icebreaker. So the icebreaker is yeah, nah, or nah, yeah. And we get quite passionate about our answers sometimes, and that's cool. Also, judgment's allowed. Judgment is always allowed on the opposing answer. But basically, so I'll say a statement, and then we'll have a little corridor, and then you can respond if that's a yeah, nah, or nah, yeah for you. So the statement is socks with sandals or jandals.
Socks with sandals or jandals?
Yeah. Do you wear socks with sandals or jandals? Is that a yeah, nah, or nah, yeah?
I think that's different. I think you need to pick sandals or jandals.
Okay, sandals.
With jandals, it's like, why would you wear socks with the little
Some
thing
people
in
do.
between?
Some people really do.
Then
Okay,
you
we'll
need
stick with
toe
sandals.
socks.
Yeah, toe socks. I love those toe socks. They're so cool.
For sandals.
Okay, so with sandals. So socks with sandals. Yeah, now, nah, yeah.
Yeah, nah.
Which one's yeah?
Nah, yeah.
Nah, yeah.
Nah, yeah.
Yeah? Why
With
are you a nah,
sandals.
yeah?
I like socks, and I just wear socks everywhere and with everything. Jandals are the one thing that I will not wear socks with, because who wears socks with?
Exactly.
But sandals, yes, I wore socks with Crocs to
Oh,
primary
yeah.
school, so yeah.
Nah,
Wow,
yeah
you
for
were
you.
in Crocs
Yeah.
in primary school.
Yeah, I was ahead of time.
You were ahead of the trend.
I was a trendsetter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And why are you yeah, nah, Trin?
I just don't really wear them. And if I do, like I wear ankle socks, and so it doesn't really make so much sense. I feel like if you're rocking socks with jandals or like scuffs, it's generally like the longer ones that go up past your ankle, and it looks trendy as. But yeah, I can't rock that. So
Yeah.
I'm just the practicality of sandals. Like, I wear sandals to keep air in my toes. Otherwise, you just wear covered shoes. Like, obviously, I'm not a fashionista, so I don't.
What?
Yeah. You don't say, huh? So it's not like I wear things for look. I wear them for practical uses. So.
True.
Yeah, and I don't often wear shoes, as you can see.
So what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
feel
like
you.
the air beneath my, between my toes.
I love feeling the air.
Yeah.
I'm a nah, yeah. I think it's because I love socks. Like, I've got these cute as Frida Kahlo socks. They're so cute. I'll show you later.
Okay.
They're really cute, and I just love showing them off. So now everyone can see them on sandals. So you can't see them if I'm wearing boots.
Okay.
So I'm a nah, yeah. Yeah, you know, we love socks around here. So that's my answer.
Hi. Great.
Cool.
All right, we'll move on to your pop quiz where you get to ask us the questions now. And it's about the topic of the day, which is conversion therapy. Not a light topic, but if we're laughing during this time, it's because we're just stupidly competitive.
We really are. It is, yeah.
Yeah, so you get to ask us the questions. We'll write an answer that
Yeah.
we think it is.
Is the answer. And Trent, if you have anything that you want to contribute to the corridor, like jump in at any point, but Shaneel
Or
will
any
ask.
questions.
Yeah, or any
that-
questions, yeah, for sure.
Ka whai?
Okay. So the first one is, what % of trans and non-binary people have experienced conversion therapy by a medical professional in Aotearoa?
Wow.
Oi.
What percent? So, out of the 100% of trans and non-binary people, who of them have experienced conversion therapy
From a medical.
from a medical professional?
Yep.
I did not even know. Man.
Okay. Because I'm trying to think of. Okay. Okay.
I've gone for
Okay.
it.
Oh, fuck. Oh, no, I don't. Oh, fudge it. Okay. I've said 48%.
68%.
It's actually much lower than that.
Oh.
It's 17%.
Wow.
Oh,
So-
wow.
Medical professionals have stopped about 17% of trans and non-binary people from being trans or non-binary.
I have stopped.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, but would they have tried with many? Like when they're doing conversion therapy, would
So
they?
it's, I don't know how many have attempted, but these are just stats for who they've just stopped.
Okay.
Right, how they stopped. Right, got you. I'd be interested to know what that looks like in a religious space.
Oh.
Yeah, because that would be
I think-
predominantly of the numbers, right?
Yeah, because I believe medical profession is where conversion therapy is least likely to happen.
Right,
So this is
okay.
probably the lowest percent
lowest.
you'll get.
Got
Right,
you.
because
Okay,
I
but,
didn't know that's where. I thought that would be where. it
but
would
religious
happen.
one is high. Would be higher. You would
I'd
assume
I'd
so?
imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Because all the anecdotal stories come from
From-
religious communities,
you.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And when it was quite common for it to be in a medical space, well, obviously those numbers are still high for sure. Like how long ago did that stop? Do you know?
These stats are quite recent.
Right, right. They're very recent.
These stats are just before we banned conversion therapy.
No. All right.
Second question. Sorry, we're like, there's some of the pop quiz. We're like this. Yes, that's
Okay.
real. Okay.
The next one's quite easy. Which month and year did New Zealand ban conversion therapy?
Freaking hell. I don't know the. I don't know if this is.
When did your book come out? March, May. I've gone with 2021 May.
I think it's. Oh, I honestly don't know. 2022 Feb.
Yep.
How much?
So February 2023 marks 1 year since the ban on conversion therapy
Wow.
in New Zealand.
Man.
That's It's still so fresh.
Yeah.
And like it. Yeah. That yeah.
Okay.
The next one is, does New Zealand's ban on conversion therapy include religious people and parents?
Can you say that question again, sorry, Shaneel?
Does New Zealand's ban on conversion therapy include religious people and parents?
I think it's this, but I don't actually know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes!
Oh yeah.
So there are no exemptions to
For-
practice
Right.
conversion therapy.
Right.
That'd be quite hard to police, eh?
That would be hard to police.
It would be very difficult to police because it
Yeah.
ultimately comes down to whether a young person reports their
Right.
church leader or their parent,
at home.
which is
situation.
very unlikely.
Yeah.
And this just shows that because now this is what it is and it's illegal, that we need to provide more education.
Absolutely.
And provide accessible education to people. Because I often think about the communities, like if I'm thinking about being Tongan, right? Like Tongan community, where do they access this information on how to, safely experience this alongside their child. So hopefully more education and accessible knowledge can be brought out to those spaces where there's like translated information too. That'd be cool.
It's not just translated information, because you can translate, all the English information, but you can't translate, say, takatapui or whakaleiti or whaafafine to English.
True.
Right.
Like these identities just do not exist in that colonial world. So when you create resources, you can't just take what they have created for white queer identities and give it to Indigenous queer communities, right? You need to create resources.
Yeah.
So I think it's giving resources to Indigenous queer peoples and allowing them to create resources for their community, because we are already doing the work for free.
Absolutely.
You just need to resource us.
Shout out to Village Collective out in South Auckland. They're doing mean mahi, and that's more of a Pasifika organisation, but yeah.
Why? Wow.
Any other questions?
Let's see.
One more? Or we good too? Yeah?
We've got two more? No?
You've got two more?
You got two more?
Yeah?
Okay.
How many do you want?
Let's do it.
I want to learn because I don't.
Okay, let's
I
do
don't
it.
know anything.
Yeah, let's do it then. Let's do it.
Can someone consent to conversion therapy in New Zealand? I see you looking at me. I see you.
I've written.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll pick a yes or no.
No?
No.
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 Okay. So you can't
Consent
have
is not a defense.
Right.
Victim consent to conversion therapy is never a defense. So it's unlike other crimes where for example, in New Zealand, you can consent to be assaulted. So you can consent to be slapped on your face.
Can you?
Yes. Consent is a
Okay.
defense. However, you cannot consent to conversion therapy. Okay, so the last one is...
Oh yeah, like you can consent to do kickboxing or something. Eh?
Yeah, you can consent to
Yeah.
rugby, you can consent
Yeah.
to lots of sports. Like sports, for example, is implied consent, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you walk into a rugby field, you
know.
consent to be tackled.
Right. Okay.
So, and the last one, I guess, the last one is, how many people submitted in favour of banning conversion therapy to Parliament, and how many against?
Can we have a total? So we can go.
A total would be around 107,000 submissions in total.
Okay.
107,000 submissions. So we have to find a number for and against.
Yeah,
Okay.
both are in the thousands.
Yeah. Trying to remember.
60,000.
Why haven't I answered?
I haven't seen if it's 4 or against. Well, obviously it's 4 because they won.
I think it's. Oh, because you said it now, I'm like changing.
Leave your numbers on there.
Okay. I think it's just a guessing game, eh? I don't even know if that's like mathematically the right answer.
I don't know either.
But look, we won't judge our maths.
You've
okay?
won so close to me.
you can see my answer.
No.
Answer.
I was already
Cut
ready to
it
answer.
out.
I decided 67,004, and I thought that with the traditional people of New Zealand, conservatives, there would have been a lot against.
Yeah. I did 70,004 and 40,000. Again, we don't know the maths, we're not mathing, but 50,000 for against.
Yeah, it really ain't method.
Okay.
We were quite lucky. It was 87,000 in favour and about 20,000 against or neutral.
Okay.
Wow, that's real. I mean, that's still a lot of people, but that's
Yeah,
big.
it was quite a successful campaign.
Yeah.
Yes, very.
Did you find that there were an apparent
Yeah.
group of people that said against?
Oh, the largest, if I had to categorize people who had submitted against, the largest group would be Christian churches.
Right,
Oh, okay.
got you. Okay.
Surprisingly, the other religions didn't come out fighting as strong.
Wow.
We had some other religions, but Christians were overwhelmingly dominating it.
Do you think that's because we've got a higher population of Christian, or is that because you think that Christians have more of a
Stance
intense,
against.
passionate stance against it?
Multiple things, right? Christians, high population. 2, Christians get away with everything. If a Muslim
Yeah.
or a Hindu community leader came out and said, I support conversion therapy, they would get crucified. Whereas if a Christian does it, it's your religious right to do whatever you want, right? And a lot of the times Christianity is associated with whiteness, Hinduism and Islam is associated with being brown. Now, as a white person, you can stand up and be in favor of conversion therapy and have people defend you. As a brown person, if you support conversion therapy, people no longer discuss your point of view, people discuss your identity.
Right.
So I think a lot of brown people who were in favor of conversion therapy did not support it because they were afraid of the racist backlash.
Yeah. Oh, that's
which
real.
is bad, but it worked in my favor.
Yeah, it did work in your favor. I love that. For those who don't know much about conversion therapy, for the both of you, how can you explain it to someone? Like, as Tahu said, like he doesn't know much about it. What is conversion therapy?
I pretty much have only heard that law came through last year. So that's all I know.
Right.
I didn't even know what conversion therapy was. Obviously, haven't grown up in a background where that's been a thing. So yeah, explain to me what actually conversion therapy looks like.
Trinity, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking as that question was asked. I think probably in its most simplest form, and it's not a simple matter whatsoever, but I think in terms of the core of it, conversion therapy is the presentation of a narrative that erases you as a valid being with a right to exist in the world. And so, like within Christianity, and I was in the Christian churches for 10 years of my life, from the age of 12, and then left about halfway through, at the start of 2017. And in its most simplest form, for my own self and my own experiences of it, is that it's, especially at such a young age, you're presented with heaven and hell, you're presented with good people and bad people, you're presented with a series of binaries that for a kid's brain seem really simple, and then it just all builds from that, and it's years of layering and complications and like extra layers added onto the dogma that essentially still creates all these binaries, and anyone not straight, anyone not cis, falls into the category of defective, like a defective iteration of humanity as a result of the original sin by Adam and Eve kind of thing. And basically it just all goes from there, and it's implicit, and then you can get other strands, you can get the racism, you can get all these other sort of, depends on the church, depends on the congregation, depends how immersed they are with whatever the cultures are. Like if it's, a church where it's all Māori, or anything like, or all like within Pacifica communities, that inherently like changes how that's necessarily packaged or presented. And I can only speak to the churches that I were in. But yeah, essentially I think that's probably the simplest way to explain it. If that, I don't know, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but is the actual practice of conversion therapy, before it was illegal, was that something that like the doctor would sit down with you and say, you are not gay, or you are a male, or you are a female? What would the practice look like?
Trinity, do you want to take this one, or should I?
Yeah, well, there's all the implicit stuff that exists within like just churches. So it's all the sort of just kind of organically homophobic and transphobic doctrine that exists and that is preached. But then in a more, I guess, explicit context, a lot of counselling degrees are done through Christian institutions. And so that then creates like a pipelines where you get all of these counsellors who deal with like the mental health of people that then apply a Christian lens, and because all of that sort of what Christianity entails and a lot of iterations of it is just inherently transphobic and homophobic, and that just sort of naturally gets lilted onto people who might be being like, I don't know, am I queer? In whatever form or expression that takes for that person. So it can look like, so for me, one church I was in, they brought in conversion therapy counsellor whose specific job was to be like, you're not queer. I was probably like 15 or 16, and so this was a specialist counsellor that charged like $200 an hour, that the church made a big deal of, like, we're bringing this person in for you. And yeah, I had a couple of sessions with her. She was an older Pākehā lady, but I was just like, oh, I don't really like you, so it didn't stick. But yeah, it can start as easily as that. But also it can happen within contexts like cell groups or small groups, which is basically like weekly, there's like your Sunday service, and then there's like small groups, or like basically groups of Christians that meet during the week. And you can go through courses. They have Christian courses on like purity, and that also gets covered of like purity as in like a man and a woman before, no sex before marriage, and all the other implicit stuff of like don't be gay, don't be non-cis, all of that kind of thing. And usually all churches that I've been to make you sign an agreement that says that you won't hold them liable, they're not liable for any damages, but then they also sort of frame it as like this is a physical representation of your commitment to God, and then in the asterisk to that is, and also we get no liability. So, and they've been doing that for years. So when the conversion therapy bill and everything like that and the push came for that, I did wonder how that was going to be handled when churches have always known that there's legal risk and have always presented and packaged the actual practice of conversion therapy in so many dressed up Christian terms that you wouldn't know left from right at the end of the day. Yeah. But what's been your experience, Shaneel, what you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would define conversion therapy is, in the most basic sense, is any practice that aims to change, suppress, or eliminate someone's queer identity to a non-queer identity. Now, New Zealand has a very interesting history of conversion therapy. Many years ago, a lady called Joan Bellingham, she grew up wanting to be a nurse, but when the word got out that she was a lesbian, she was taken to the hospital, not as a nurse, but as a patient. She was given 200 electric shocks in her time at the Princess Margaret Hospital to cure her of her lesbianism.
Right, so they use physical
back
abuse
then
as well.
they used electric shocks to cure someone's queerness, right? But things have changed and they've become more subtle. So people use things like psychoanalysis, where you sit down with a counselor one-on-one and they tell you that your sexuality can absolutely be changed, right? But there's also things like evasion therapy that's trying to associate your queerness with pain. So you get told that wear a rubber band, and every time you have a queer thought, snap yourself with a rubber band. So essentially what you're doing is that you're associating your queerness with pain, and therefore accepting that you're queer becomes a punishment in itself. And it's not just snapping yourself with a rubber band, it's taking ice cold showers, pinching yourself, etc., etc. But I think where we see it happen most commonly is obviously religious communities, right? And the reason why it's so easy for it to happen in religious communities is often because a religious leader has so much authority that no one will ever question them, right? So when I was growing up in my small village in Fiji, in a very religious village, when the church leader said that this needs to happen, that needs to happen, and no one can disagree with them. Anyone who disagrees with the leader of the church or the temple is shunned upon and removed from the community. So everyone's trying to protect their place in the community. So as a young person who's only ever known and loved their family and their community, you are told that if you do not change, your family will disown you, your church will banish you, and you will burn in hell for the rest of your life. Now say an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old who's never been outside their village, that's what you present to them. No 10-year-old is going to choose to be disowned by their family and get banished by their community.
Yeah, they'll try their hardest.
They'll try their hardest to
everyone.
conform and find a sense of belonging, and conversion therapy for a lot of young queer people presents as hope. As much as we hate to admit it, a lot of young queer people think that conversion therapy can truly help them.
Right.
And that's why they go into it, because hoping they will change. And what often happens is that young people go into conversion therapy knowing that if they do not change, their family will disown them. But once they get into conversion therapy, they realize that change is not happening. So they just have to accept that their family will disown them. And that just drives them into a really dark place.
Or pretend that it has changed them.
Oh yeah, a lot of people try to pretend. I know many people who've pretended, got married, had kids, and then come out later in life.
Where do they draw the line legally, now that it's illegal in New Zealand to use conversion therapy, where there's like a bully at a school and they're telling them like, you shouldn't be gay, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't blah blah blah. When does that become conversion therapy versus bullying?
Well, the law is quite clear that it's, a consistent practice, right? So
Right.
calling someone a derogatory slur is not conversion therapy. Telling someone they should change their identity is not conversion therapy. Those are just, comments and remarks that are made.
Right.
The threshold for prosecuting someone under the Conversion Practices Prohibition Legislation Act is very high. So it has to be a practice, but it also has to be, you intended to change their
Right.
identity
Right.
and you cause them some level of harm. So if you're under the age of 18, you just need to prove that the person practiced conversion therapy with the intent of changing your identity. If you're above 18, then you have to prove that the person practiced conversion therapy with the intent of changing your identity and caused you serious harm.
Wow. Yeah. Before we started filming, we had a
Oh my
little.
days.
Yeah, I'm like,
holy
yeah.
fuck.
Before we started filming, we had a little corridor, and you shared some really amazing point of views around the conflict of deciding to go and push this forward for rightful reasons. Can you share about what that conflict looked like for you during this process?
Trinity, I'll pass this on to you after my answer, because I think you'll have something to add as well. I think I was 19 years old when I went to youth parliament and gave my speech to ban conversion therapy. Quite young, quite naive, did not fully understand what I was about to embark, right? So I started the movement to ban conversion therapy 2017, 2018, and then 2019 was the peak of our movement. And we were essentially advocating for a ban on conversion therapy, which would create a criminal offense. And the older I got, the more I realized that essentially you have this practice that's horrendous and you want to outlaw it, but with that comes a criminal offense. And that is the extension of the state's power into people's personal lives. We know that homophobia and transphobia, due to colonization, is more prevalent in brown communities. What we also know is that the criminal justice system disproportionately affects people of color. So essentially, when you criminalize homophobia and transphobia, you are creating a crime with a double whammy to affect Indigenous people and people of color. And that was the inner turmoil, that do I want to create a criminal offense, or do I want this practice to be outlawed? And obviously we came on the side of we want this practice outlawed. But I think the most, controversial part of the movement was to ban conversion therapy. What really got missed out was our advocacy to ensure that people who suffered conversion therapy had ACC support.
Absolutely.
The government declined that. And the other thing was ensuring that there were resources to community organizations to create education for community members, right? And that was also declined. So currently there's no resources for mental health support or education for queer community and their family. Because a ban on conversion therapy is not an end on conversion therapy. A ban is a criminal offense which requires people to offend and the police to catch them and prosecute them. What we know in New Zealand is that we have one of the highest rates of recidivism, which means that people, when they get out of prison, they offend again.
Right.
Ending conversion therapy looks like educating an entire generation of people so that conversion therapy just doesn't happen. We've banned conversion therapy. Now the responsibility to end it has fallen on the shoulders of queer people.
Trinity, do you have something to add to that?
No, I was just listening. I was like, yep, that pretty much
Sums it up.
on the head.
It's so weird that brown communities are most prevalent to be homophobic, because in Indigenous narratives, we treasured our takatapui, especially in Māori narratives. That's the only one I can speak from, because that's all I know. And for us to be the most against our own people, it was just bullshit. Fucking bullshit, the colonisation. But
colonisation, bullshit.
But it's crazy that that's a whole fact that you have to think about, as about making that law was putting more pressure on.
Yeah, criminalising all brown people, and it would have been people like our parents.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you find, Trin, I noticed you got your kauai done, but your pronouns are they, them. What was that like to make that decision where you took on because now we see kauai being for wahine, eh? And traditionally at some iwis it wasn't the case. We have carvings of wahine with full facial moko and wearing their puhoro as well. So it's not that there's a right or wrong to this is for wahine, because I've got my kauai too. So does that make, yeah. So if we think about it like that, but for today's narrative, it's definitely seen more for wahine. How did you feel about doing it?
Yeah, it was definitely like an interesting wānanga to have. I think at the time that I received my kauai, it was, when was it? 2018. It was before the meritocracy narrative had really been like thoroughly overturned by the likes of Leone Pihama and our like kapi wahine, who really, and our academics who really were just like, this is completely like and utterly wrong. This is the internalisation of colonisation, that you have to earn what is yours by whakapapa and by birthright. And so at the time I knew of one other person who was my age that also had kauai. And at the time I was like, I guess is still just so working through all the stuff that the church leaves you with naturally, that the idea of exploring being genderqueer just wasn't even on my consciousness, and has come sort of at a later date over the last couple of years. And it is definitely an interesting negotiation. I think part of what helps is that I'm also mau puhoro, but that wasn't necessarily driven by wanting to sort of neutralise the effect of kauai necessarily. I was driven to really seek healing and feel like at home in your body, because I think that's one of the things that being in somewhere like the church for so long can have a really damaging effect, in the sense of like feeling safe in your body, and when that collides with other like trauma layers, that it's kind of just a recipe for feeling constantly like your body's a liability. And I don't know, I was just like, I've got stuff to do in this world. I don't really have time for like feeling like I'm just a walking liability waiting to have harm inflicted on me. And so that's what sort of motivated receiving puhoro. But there's also been, I think, a little bit of like a narrative that you can, like a way of expressing takatapuitanga is through being mau puhoro. But I mean, it's really cool just seeing the moko resurgence, especially within our wahine kaitā, and also our tāne, who are just looking to, because that was one of my big things, is do we have any designs like facial moko that specifically codes you as takatapui? Because that would be really cool. But I guess it's just exploring that space really, and just sort of seeing what happens, waiting and seeing what happens, because I don't think there's really any solid answers, but that's also okay, because it is what it is at the moment.
That's really interesting.
I love that you brought like this Māori perspective to this, because it's so important that we relate it back to the communities that we're saying are being affected by it. Being Fijian and South Asian, are there things that you've tapped into, like pre-colonization, what that would have looked like for Fijians and South Asians when it came to being queer, trans, whatnot? Yeah.
I mean, Fijians obviously have the Vakasa lewa and they're known as, the third gender, but I obviously reject this idea of a third gender because who's the first and who's the second? This idea that there's a first and a second is very Christian, that men came first and women came second, and then there's a third gender. And I reject that. I think people just existed.
Sure.
And, being Vakasa lewa was never an issue or something to think about because it was just so naturally occurring in our community, in our society. So, and that's why I think Indigenous peoples never really made a big deal out of it.
Absolutely.
It was just there. And, Indians and South Asians obviously have one of the richest queer cultures, and it's the Hijra Samaj, right? It's really interesting because when I look back at, the laws that were used to criminalize Hijra, which are the trans people, right? The laws that were used in Australia to uplift Aboriginal children were used in India to uplift trans people's children and trans people themselves. So essentially, a lot of trans people could not have their own kids biologically. So their role in society was to care for the children who did not have parents or elders to take care of them. And so trans people played this fundamental role in Indian society to ensure the caring of children who did not have anyone else. And so when colonization happened, they were like, oh my God, these trans people are so evil. Let's uplift the children that they are taking care of. And so you see how colonization of, Indigenous peoples, such as a law in Australia that was uplifting Aboriginal children, is so directly related to the dismantling of queer Indigenous peoples. And I think a lot of the times people do not see that such intrinsic, inherent connection between racism and homophobia and transphobia.
They're all linked.
They're all linked. It's like an octopus, right?
Right.
Colonization is the head, and then it uses its arms, like racism and homophobia and sexism and transphobia, and it's got us all tangled up, fighting each other.
Always fighting each other.
Man.
Just cut the head off.
Yeah.
I was gonna get it out. I remember it. I've been thinking just while you've been talking, and please, you don't need to answer it if you don't want to, especially because I don't want to be putting your whānau in a position where there could be further hurt. But if you feel comfortable enough to share, what was the process of both of you experiencing conversion therapy surrounding your whānau's involvement around whether that be their decision to have you experience it or even you going through it, and then what that looked like after the fact?
Who goes?
Whoever, Shaneel or Trin, whoever wants to go. Trin, would you like to answer?
Yeah. Okay. I definitely, there was a series of circumstances that meant that I ended up at the very start of being introduced to the church. It kind of meant that I ended up being immersed in the church culture for I don't know, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks. And so initially that's kind of what led to it sort of sticking in the way that it did. And so in terms of my whānau and their role, they didn't really know how deep I was in it, and I don't think they knew that they definitely didn't know the harm that was being caused. And sometimes they'd come along to church services, but I think because they weren't queer, none of the invisible layers of I guess at its most basic form is this kind of hegemonic heteronormative coercion towards that other were sort of not necessarily as blatantly obvious for someone who's in the closet being fuck, I don't want to end up in hell. And so they didn't really know, and I didn't really talk about it. I was just quite a quiet person, so and in terms of my Māoritanga, I grew up disconnected and didn't wasn't able to begin reconnecting until uni, which was like by that time 6 years into the church. So by that point it was like, and really the only reason I left is because I was either gonna die trying to be straight, or I was gonna just be, or I was just gonna decide to live, and I decided to live, and so that meant leaving the church. But yeah, in terms of whānau involvement, yeah, they didn't really know how bad it was, and I didn't know how to talk about it, so no one won there.
True. Thank you for that, Trin.
I have a somewhat similar story when it comes to the involvement of my parents, because a lot of it was triggered by the elders who were leading the church and leading the temple and people at school, right? And I think the reason my parents did not know is it's really important to understand the way that the islands work, right? Fiji is a collectivist community, which means that the elders can look after everyone's children. Your parent can look after me, and my parent can look after you. And, you know, the way that people discipline children in Fiji is, put very simply, illegal in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So violence towards children is quite common. So if, you know, an elder had someone's child, it wouldn't have been seen as deeply problematic. Something that does not require further investigation, right? So that context is really important to when you try to understand why my conversion therapy remained hidden from my parents, is that, you know, the church already had the power to look after me.
Having to ask.
The church already had power to look after me and all the other children. So whatever they did with me was none of anyone else's concern. And I didn't tell my parents that conversion therapy had started, because one of the things that the church threatened me with was that my family would disown me. So if I wanted to tell my parents, that would require me to somehow believe that the church was lying, that my parents would disown me. And as a child who did not know any better, I believed the church, because for many years these elders had functioned as people who made me believe they cared for me and had my best interests at heart. But I guess, to be the devil's advocate, which is probably the worst thing to be in a situation like this, I grew up in Fiji during a time it was a crime to be gay. So up till the age of 10, it was a crime to be gay, and all the elders knew that it was a crime to be gay. So there's a part of me, and I think it's a very optimistic part of me, that thinks that maybe they were trying to change me so that I would not be criminalized. And I say it's a very optimistic part of me because I don't know if that's what they were trying to do. I don't know if they were trying to protect me from criminalization, or if they really just hated queer people and wanted me to change. But it was so much more nuanced than, you know, just showing up to church and them saying, change. But then, you know, even if they did want me to truly change and they did not like queer people, it's, you know, years of colonial conditioning that's led our people to this stage where they hate people who are so intrinsically important to their community. You know, it's... Queer people were always an important part of our community. Colonization uprooted that and conditioned our people with homophobia and transphobia. And then after years of that, we've lost a lot of Indigenous knowledge, as colonization has done for many Indigenous groups. But the re-education process never happened. And I think that's happening for our generation, but it's never happened for our parents and our grandparents, and it might never happen. But I'm hopeful that the next generation and the one after that, it gets progressively better.
That's beautiful. Like, we're supposed to be rapping, but that like triggered a story for me.
Go ahead.
When I was young, my father he's a hard man as is, but he was a really homophobic dude, like vocally homophobic. Just how everyone seemed to have like this poor use of language, and just had no time for that concept. That the concept was even real to him. You know, he thought there was a choice. And when I was really little, he said something to me like, "Don't do that, it's gay." And I remember asking like, "Oh, Dad, well, what's wrong with gay?" Like I had to because I'm just a curious dude anyway, but I had to really I posed the question to him. I was like, what's wrong with being gay? And then he's like, couldn't explain to me what was wrong with it. Yeah, and then I was like, because I think I want to be gay. I thought it was a choice as a kid. Yeah, because I thought that was cool. I thought, So I might want to be gay. I used to try and push boundaries probably, and I think that I asked that, and he was just like, well, it wouldn't be wrong if you were gay, son, because he's always been clear with that he'll love me no matter what. And I was like, so then what's wrong with any gay? And he then come to obviously realize how his information had always been just homophobic, and he had just been given wrong information his whole life, and he's changed ever since.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, my sister, she is ridiculous. She is bi,
Right.
and she has boyfriends and girlfriends come, and all her queer community whānau come to our place all the time. And Dad, changed man, hugging them, loves them. I'm like, look at you. I remember when I was little, you were pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that people can change as well through information.
Absolutely.
And through love.
Yeah, through love. And also what I love most is that such a naive, innocent question from a child could have changed the way your dad thought about it. And when you pose a question like that, but what's wrong with being gay?
Explain to me, please, because I would like to know.
Yeah, and that would have changed what is wrong? That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just from that beautiful kōrero from Tahu, I'm wondering, do the both of you have any advice for people that have gone through conversion therapy that you'd like to share with them?
I would say to all the queer children who are fighting to live another day to keep fighting. Because when I was a kid, I truly did not believe that I would make it to 18. And here I am at 22 living one of my best lives. So life changes, mine change, yours will. And for those who are fighting, we have your back.
Yes.
Aye.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Shaneel.
Yeah, echo a similar sentiment and just say that it's not your fault. And it's not your fault that you're going through it, or that the environment around you normalizes the othering and the erasure of your queerness, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful, wonderful part of you, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that's hard because in the context of conversion therapy, even if it's just the implicit sphere of it, it can be really hard to actually believe anything other than queerness is bad. So yeah, just I think believe that you can exist past the constraints of an environment that tells you don't deserve to exist.
That's it. That's it. For those who want to access the both of you or find out more information, where can people find you? Where about more conversion therapy information, both in that mahi but also personally?
Or just the community to
just
be
the community, yeah. To get more visibility. Trin, where can people find you?
Oh yeah, just on Instagram. I mean, I haven't really been on there heaps, but all of my writing is just about validating the emotional landscape that we exist in as Indigenous bodies and as people, and then also just the photos because it's nice to be able to see queer people and just all kinds of people feeling seen in a way that's not intrusive. So yeah.
Google me.
Yeah. I love it. We love to
That's so
see it.
funny.
Find you, eh?
You Google me and they have my date of birth, my place of birth, my Instagram, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my Facebook. Girl, somebody has been stalking me.
Shaneel Lal.
But to be fair, I think sending me an email, which is attached to my Instagram is probably the best way to get in touch with me. I reply to my emails on time. I do not reply to my DMs on time. There are too many messages.
Yeah. So emails is where it's at.
Yeah.
Amazing. And Conversion Therapy has a website or an
Yeah,
Instagram page?
And Conversion Therapy NZ is the handle for
Cool.
the Instagram account. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I love that you also ended trend of like that you see queer people and that we also bring the joy and the love and the color of life and the visibility of that. So I think that's a beautiful way to end. And anyone who's experienced conversion therapy, just sending you so much aroha and just a lot of love.
Oh yeah, thank you too.
Yeah.
Lovely souls to have a wānanga with today. I've
Yeah.
learnt a lot.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very,
A lot of sit with, eh?
I feel optimistic.
Yeah.
Like I can learn these things. Like I'm good at learning. Like
I'm a great student.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the both of you. Like, much appreciation for your time, your energy, and your love. I know it's not an easy topic, so thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, guys. We'll see you in the next episode for Under the Whāriki. Until next time, ka kite anō.
Ka kite anō.